إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, what I wanted to do today is, I don't see this as an interruption of our hadith class, and I don't see it as a detour. Instead, what I see it as is an addendum. Because many of the scholars who we've been mentioning, like Imam Abdul Sufyan al-Qudumi and others, it would not be possible to discuss them without discussing the history of Duma and what exactly this place is. It's been in the news a couple of times. It's been disgustingly mispronounced as Doma, along with Gota and Guta, and it's just a lot of foolishness that's been going on. You would think that as old of a place as it is, that both Kafir and Muslim would have been able to figure out a received pronunciation for it. I'm not sure why this has been the case. For us, it's interesting because it has a tarikh. So we're going to be looking today at Tarikhu Madinati Duma, the history of the city of Duma, particularly its establishment, its scholars, its luminaries, and its influence. It's important for us to understand this because we've heard rumors of the chemical attack that's occurred. All right, now this is Al-Jami' al-Kabir of Duma. This is before and after the destruction photos, before and after. Now, it's one of the great historical monuments of Syria in the city of Duma. Now, a lot of us saw the disturbing images during the demonstrations, as well as the emergence of the military form of the Khawarij in Syria. We also heard about a supposed chemical attack in this area. I'm not going to get into whether it is or it wasn't, or I don't know one way or another because information is still lacking and I don't have all the data. So what we want to do is we want to look at the building of Duma. The land, this is the land of, part of the land of the Aramean people. Duma is a small piece of Syria, which at one point was part of the greater land of the Aramean people. The area that Duma is in started out as a portion of the Aramean Empire from the 11th to the 8th centuries BC, which ruled the Near East and used Aramean as its lingua franca. This remains the case today in Syria ethnically and racially, although there are sizable populations of Arabs and Kurds. So Syria is not Arab. Its lingua franca is Arabic, but its people are not for the most part Arabs. Its people are for the most part Arameans. And then groups of Arabs and Kurds. But the Syrians are not Arabs, by and large. Just like the Iraqis, as you see, are not Arabs, by and large. They are Arameans. Arabs came in. There are sizable Arab groups, but they are not Arabs as a majority. The Arameans, this empire is the same empire near this that Nabiuna Ibrahim alayhi salam came out of when he immigrated. In the time of Nabiuna Ibrahim alayhi salam, the Aramean Empire was just beginning to take over the land space that it had. So he's coming out of this people. And it would be the marriage between Nabiuna Ibrahim alayhi salam and Hajar alayhi salam from people from South Egypt that would produce the Arabs of history that we know. So this is very significant. Now, looking at the Aramean people, we see inscriptions. We see how they viewed themselves, what they drew themselves as resembling. So these are a light-skinned people. They were not amhaq, they were not pale, but they were a light-skinned people. And we see their inscriptions, which is the Aramaic language. Aramaic is still spoken today in most of your Orthodox churches. It is still used today for the Passion of the Christ, Aramaic was used as a language by consulting with the people of northern Syria, the Christians living there, and other tribesmen that are still alive. This is the symbol of the standard of the Arameaic Empire. Now, we see even today the Arameaic influence. This is an old Iraqi flag bearing the eagle that resembles the past. Now, if you look at this, you see the eagle here, then you see the eagle here. Because this is a throwback to this Aramean Empire, these people being Arameans, which the Iraqis by and large are. This is the old Syrian flag. So even today, the Aramean occult symbols and signs remain. The majority of people in these countries are still Aramean, and some of the vestiges of the empire continue to hold significance. Now, these symbols would later take on another meaning with time, but that's for another discussion, because these occult symbols would be later used and accommodated by another group. But that's another discussion for right now. Now, the religion of the Aramean people. Arameans had many gods. Some were astral, which means these are sky gods that have to do with heavenly bodies, while others were based around fertility cults, had to do with crops, asking deities to make crops grow or to make rivers inundate with silt. The main god that would be used in the place that would become Duma was the sun. So the people of Duma worship the sun god. Now, recently in the place that will become Duma, a huge temple was uncovered by archaeologists that showed the worship of the sun god. And the sun god that they worshipped was masculine. Right? It was a masculine deity. Now, not long after this, these people have been worshiping the sun. Then Christianity comes. Now, Christianity came to the Aramean people in the first 100 years of the Christian calendar, in the year 64 AD, when the Roman Empire became Christian. At this point, Syria was part of the Roman Empire. And as it was part of the Roman Empire, it became a province. And the area that would become Duma was the home of the Banu Taghlib, who were priests. Now, keep this in mind, because the Banu Taghlib, they're going to come in later. If we remember from the Sirah, the Banu Taghlib were a tribe that the Prophet ﷺ dealt with. They were Christians, right? And he had a special relationship with them and certain treaties set up. Now, as you can see, this is an Aramean priest. You see him wearing what looks like an amama, what looks like a tarbush. You see the cross, the signs and symbols of the Syriac church. Now, Aramean Christians and their ancient foothold in Christianity. This is a map here of the history of the Arameans and how their church developed. The Syrian Orthodox Church of Antioch, known as the mother of all Syrian churches, gave rise to so many others, churches that we still see today. You've heard of people being referred to as Assyrians in Iraq? These are Arameans. You've heard Chaldeans being referred to. These are Arameans, right? So in Iraq, the Chaldeans that you hear about, the Assyrians, all these groups, these are all Arameans. Racially, these people are not Arabs. They're Arameans. Now, Aramaic continued to be used to the point that it became a part of the liturgy, and it's used in all services. So at this point, what they've done is they've replaced the worship of the sun and other astral deities with the rise of Christianity. And so here we see the original church of starting 37 AD or thereafter. Then we see the followers of Nestorius. A theological dispute occurs. 451, we have the Syrian Melkite Byzantine Church, right? The Melkite, which is your Latin Rite Catholics, which formally constitute themselves in the year 580 of AD. The Syrian Maronite Church of 410. Eastern Syrian Nestorian Church of 431. The 1352 Chaldean Church, right? And then you have all these other different churches that have broken off. But they're all coming back from that original church in the beginning, which was Aramean speaking, and all these maintained most of these traditions. The Latin Rite, which was split off, took on Latin for whatever reason it chose to. Now, this is where Duma is located on the map. Historically, the city's been variously spelled Duma, Dume, or Duma. Now, there are two reasons why this site has this name. Two reasons. Number one, the individual who built the first Christian monastery in the enclosure named the small village next to it Duma. This is a Byzantine name that could be male or female. The individual that gave that name did so on account of his daughter. There's also another reason why it's called Duma. The type of trees that grew there are called doom, but a single tree of this certain breed of palm tree, a single type of these trees is called a duma or a dume. Now, the doom in particular are a class of palm trees that grow alongside of a structure that we know as Al-Jami' So, in looking at the meaning of Duma, Dume, or Duma, okay, this is coming from Byzantium. When you examine the language, it bears the meaning of beautiful with beauty. It also denotes restfulness, a state of being at ease. Now, Islam then enters Duma. Islam comes into Duma. Now, how did Islam reach these people? Well, we need to talk a little bit about this place. This place is quite well known. It is known as Al-Jami' al-Kabir. This is such an interesting building, right? In the time of the Arameans, Al-Jami' al-Kabir, obviously didn't have this name, it was a temple dedicated to the worship of the sun god. When the Roman Empire's armies arrived, they found that a synagogue had been built around the back of the temple by Jews hiding their faith after the AD 70 sacking of Jerusalem. Then, Christians entered Duma and the people converted. And the Banu Taghlib priests converted this, what was a sun god temple, they converted it into a church and built a hostel next door for monks and visitors. And this site was called Duma, or Duma. So this is the late Christian going into Islam entrance. So we're going to talk about how this comes to be. This masjid here is one of the other older masjids, Masjid Nasim in Duma. Now, Islam arrived in Sham in the year 13 AH. This is when the Dumi people get introduced to Islam. This is extremely powerful because that's 2 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are early. You see, you have different groups of people that are referred to. You have first wave, second wave, and third wave Muslims. The first wave are those who felt the impact of the companions coming to them and those people. These people belong to this first wave. The first wave people that were converts because of the companions. And then you have the students of the companions and the students of the companions being that second wave. Third wave are people not from the first 3 generations coming after that point. These are third wave Muslims, right? These are first wave. Okay, so the Dumi people are introduced to Islam. So in the year 13 AH, through the direction of Khalid bin al-Walid, who was coming from Iraq initially, he had 4 high-ranking members of the companions with him. Number 1, Amr ibn al-As, who also would take over Egypt. Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan, Abu Ubaid ibn al-Jarrah, and Sharhabil ibn Hasana. And these are all teachers as well, these particular people. So it means that they're coming for the purpose of someone not only coming into Islam, but that they be taught Islam. So it's not just Khalid coming with his army, because Khalid was a layman. He's also coming with people. Now, when Khalid ibn al-Walid entered the area called Al-Ghouta, which is mispronounced as Guta, when he entered Al-Ghouta, he planted his standard at the place known as Al-Iqab. From that point, the location was called Thaniyatul Iqab. So this was Islam's initial entrance into that area. When Khalid al-Walid first came into Sham and conquered it, he conquered Duma before he conquered Damascus. Because the direction he was coming from was not the Damascus side, he was coming from up, down. Because Iraq is above Sham, above Syria. So he found that day that the Dumi people were cultured, noble, and firm on their religion. He spoke to them about Islam, and so did those with him. He had with him thousands of fighters, but by examining them and speaking to them, he found that no war would take place between them. In response to Islam, six families converted to Islam. 6 families, and we have the names of these families. 6 families converted to Islam, which are the Injila, the Khabiyya, the Sariyul, the Tabaju, the Aybur, and the Al-Mughayyar. The rest of the Dumi people stayed established upon Christianity. So these people came here and said, they came here to these people, offered them Islam, they looked at it, 6 families said, we'll become Muslim. But the rest of them said, we'll stay established on our religion. Now, this shows you how plucky the Dumi people are, because they weren't satisfied with that. They further called, so Khalid al-Walid and his people are setting down principles in a covenant of settlement with the people of Duma. And they're calling for a condition upon Khalid al-Walid that he leave them on their Christian religion and that he not obligate them to the jizya. So they're saying, listen, some of us become Muslim, those of us that don't want to, we're staying Christian. We ask that you don't stress to us that we've got to become Muslim. Those of us who want to will. And we ask that you also don't obligate us for the jizya. If so, they warned, so the Dumis are actually warning, if so, they would leave from Sham into the Byzantine Empire. So if you don't let us carry on this standard and do what it is we've asked you to do, we'll just leave. Now the Dumi people, it's not like they're sitting on a gold mine of natural resources or anything. Duma is a hamlet. It's not a huge city. But they're just saying, if you won't let us be who we are, we'll just up and leave. We don't want to be a jizya, and we want to convert at our own pace if we so choose to. So what happened? Khalid al-Walid killed them all. Yes? No. It's not what happened. In response to this, Khalid al-Walid sent a letter to the Khalifa of the time, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, asking him what should be done. The response from the Khalifa by letter was, leave them upon their religion and lift the jizya from them. The only condition is that what? I thought the jizya was farad ayn, it's got to be done no matter what, and if you don't do it, they have to be killed immediately and leave everybody, leave no one standing and kill everyone they find. No? Okay, just check. So he said again, leave them upon their religion and lift the jizya from them. The only condition is that they and the Muslims mutually help one another and the Christians defend them in times of difficulty. Sounds reasonable. Further on, Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, he now comes on behalf of Umar, ratifies the covenant from the Christians of the area that their church would not be harmed, their cloisters would be left intact. The only other conditions were that they, A, help the one lost in the area on his way. So if you find somebody lost, help him on his way, because there's going to be people in that area that don't know. Like who? Arabs. They're not from there. They don't know anything about the topography or anything. Find an Arab that's lost, what do? Kill him. No, don't kill him. Help him on his way. B, use their wealth to build bridges over the rivers, because at the time there were boats that you had to use to get around. So they want bridges built. But they said, listen, use some of the wealth that you have, because these people had wealth, and build bridges over the rivers. And C, offer hospitality to the Muslims passing through for 3 days and feed them the same food the locals eat. Right? So if we're passing through, you as Christians, just give us 3 days. If we don't know anybody, we're going somewhere, just at least give us 3 days worth of food. And after that, we're gone. They agreed the principles. All seemed to be going well until some of the new Muslims from these 6 families made life difficult for the Christians. So they moved to the nearby area of Harastat. It is for this reason that all the Christians of Harastat are originally Dumi people. So something happened where the Muslims, these 6 Aramean families, thought, you guys all need to be Muslim. And they said, no. And so the Christians wound up making the exit, and Harastat is not far from that area. In the year 531 AH, the north wall of the area was extended beyond Al-Jami' al-Kabir, so that it was a distinct and walled off city from the rest of Damascus. Now Duma was its own place, location, and now it required its own authorities, judges, and fiqh scholars. The following letter signifies this point. It runs, in the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. The masjids are only to be maintained by those who believe in Allah and the Last Day. This is what is understood, and the area now has a waqf, and the charity and property handed over by the governor, Taghra Dakin, Bahlawan, Jihan, Mahmud, Ibn Budi, Ibn Atabak Husam, the leader of the believers. And may Allah curse whoever changes it or changes the boundaries of the land around it specified, which is east of the bridge. This was ratified in the year 531 AH at Masjid Duma. So now we see Duma coming into historical reality, 531 AH, as a city that has Muslims, masjids, and at this point, the church that had been there has enough Muslims to where now it becomes to be known as Al-Jami' al-Kabir, the great gathering masjid. Right? Now let's talk about some early Maraji of Duma. One of them is Imam Ahmed ad-Dumi. He died 1107 AH. One of the great Maraji'. He was one of the people of Ijtihad in his time, as mentioned in As-Suhub al-Wabila ala Darah al-Hanabila, volume 1, pages 280 to 281. Now, during this time, when Duma was first walled off as a separate city in 531 Hijri, they were still having Maraji' from other parts of Sham and other places. But then Duma started producing its own authorities, started producing its own Maraji', its own people. And by producing its own people, these people start to go out and make the Dumi name. So someone coming from Duma usually is called either Dumi or Dumani. Right? And these people go out and they make the name of Duma known. In Egypt and other places, they become first-rate scholars of high regard. The next one was Imam Hamza ibn Yusuf ibn Mahmud ad-Dumi. He lived from 1035 to 1116. He's one of the Marja people in his time, and he was one of the students of Imam al-Balbani, who died 1083 AH. As-Suhub al-Wabil ala Darah al-Hanabila, volume 1, pages 379 to 380. Now, what sticks out about him is he's not only was he one of the students of Imam al-Balbani, but he was one of his greater students, like one of his outstanding students. And as we know, Imam al-Balbani, he wrote numerous fiqh classics. He wrote that summary of the Lum'ah in terms of breaking those points down, made something really extensive. He wrote the shortest fiqh text, known as Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat, on the fiqh of Imam Ahmed. Very short text, rhyming. It's around 89 pages, right? Very short text. It's the shortest one that there is. And so he comes from Duma, working over this text, studying it, researching it. Now, the Dumi people are coming from Sham. Their actual location is Sham. So the book that they wind up settling on for their rulings winds up being Dalil al-Talib Linail al-Matalib by Imam Maraji ibn Yusuf al-Karmi, who had died 1033. They decided to settle upon that as their main book for hifz as well as research. Now that text that they settle upon, they build all their other arguments based upon that text. So they use it as a beginning text, they use it as a text for hifz, and they use it as a reference text. So normally what happens in other places is you'll have 3 books in a series sometimes. And so you'll have your beginning text, which you do hifz of. Then you have your mid-level text, right, which you do hifz and your references and your other texts like your evidences. And then you have your third level, which is your reference and your other things. What the Dumi people decided to do is to make that one text, that's our standard, that's it. And we'll use all other books based upon that principle. Now, the madhab of Imam Ahmed entered into Sham, and specifically Duma, because we're talking about this place, specifically entered into Duma in the very early days. It entered in because a lot of the borders that you see between, say, Arabia and Iraq today weren't there in the form that you see them in. So there was a lot of, the borders were quite porous, so you could go between one and another. And the Dumis studied with the Shami people and also the Iraqis. Very well-known people, the Iraqis. Another example is Imam Abdul Qadir At-Taghlabi. He died 1133 AH. He was one of the Maraji of his time and commentator on Dalil al-Talib. He is a Dumi, although born in Damascus. All right, this is Nail al-Ma'arib, Bisharhi Dalil al-Talib, Nail al-Matalib, pages 1 through 3, which includes his biography. Now, Imam Abdul Qadir At-Taghlabi is actually from the Banu Taghlib, which means that he is from a family. That's why he has that last name, Taghlabi. He is from the Banu Taghlib tribe, which means he's an Aramean. So these are Aramean Christian converts from the Banu Taghlib, converted into Islam from Duma originally, and came into Islam and did not have to pay the jizya during that time because they're based in Duma, and the Duma people were already told by Omar, lift the jizya from them, they're not required. So they became Muslim under their own auspices. And this man is one of these people. His landmark text is Nail al-Ma'arib Bisharhi Dalil al-Talib Nail al-Matalib, which is a very small text. It's a small commentary on Imam Marja ibn Yusuf al-Karmi, the great Palestinian scholar from Tulkarm. His work, At-Taghlabi's work, is a short, sharp commentary, and is one of the authoritative commentaries that you study if you study the Dalil. If you study the Dalil and you ask for authoritative commentaries, you cannot study the Dalil without his commentary, because he fleshes out a lot of other systematic points that are often not thought about. He also deals with a lot of other matters to do with commercial law, which has to do with maritime trade and things like this. So he's a standout scholar, right? Another famous Dumi, one of the Maraji of his age. Now this is interesting because Imam Mustafa Ad-Dumani, as I said, the people that are coming from Duma, they're either called Dumi or Dumani. He died in 1192 Hijri. Started his studies there, headed off to Damascus as well as Egypt and Constantinople, right? He's one of the grand Maraji of his age. Now, he was both Sheikh al-Azhar as well as Sheikh of Constantinople, the Sheikh over the Jama'ah of that time, right, of the Khilaf at that time. So he was holding 2 posts at the same time, right? And he's mentioned in Mukhtasar Tabaqat al-Hanabila, pages 176 to 177. Now, he wrote a number of texts, but his most famous presentation is his Hashia on the Dalil al-Talib, which is, it's like footnotes. It's a series of interlinear notes and footnotes. So what he's done is he's taken all the commentators that have ever spoken on the Dalil in his time, and he's gathered them all together, reduced them to footnotes, and created a clever coding system that he's used in the beginning. And he used this as like a source manual for Qadis. And it became a situation where the Dalil was used at Al-Azhar for a number of years. Now, are we getting close to Maghrib? Yeah? What's the time? Okay, all right. I'll just go over one point and then we'll start. Now, let's look at recent Maraji' of Duma. recent Maraji. We'll start with this Imam here. Imam Uthman Nuri al-Khatib. He lived from 1297 to 1385. Right? This Imam, absolutely amazing. I had to actually gather together some notes on him. Now, he came from a family of scholars. His father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather were Maraji. All of them. And his studies started with his father, Sheikh Uthman al-Khatib, who was the teacher and preacher of Duma in his time. After he completed the memorization of elementary books of creed, fiqh, and Arabic language and grammar, he made his way to Damascus and went to a number of schools and seminaries. He began to study the tafsir collections of Imam Ibn Jawzi, Ibn Adil, Ibn Kathir, and others. Ibn Adil's tafsir, he's a big Hanbali theologian. That's around 11 volumes. So he went through that. Ibn Jawzi's tafsir literature, and that just doesn't mean Zad al-Nasir, which we did. He's also did the other two, the introductory one and the medium one, and then the expanded one. So he did like all the tafsir literature. In the area of hadith, he focused on hifz of the collections of Al-Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Ibn Marja, and Nasa'i, At-Tabarani, radiyallahu anhum, as well as the memorization of the Musnad of Imam Ahmed, Imam Shafi'i, as well as Abu Ya'la al-Mawsili. Now, when he studied Usul al-Fiqh, Imam al-Khatib then went to the study of Mukhtasar al-Rawda, which was Rawdat al-Nadir wa Jumlat al-Munadir. It's a book of Usul al-Fiqh by Imam Muwaffaq Qudama. There's a Mukhtasar of it, which is a summary by Imam al-Tufi, who died 716. He memorized that, built his knowledge upon that, studied that in great detail. And after this, the Sheikh then went back to the branches and reviewed what he'd memorized of Al-Umda, because he had memorized Al-Umda. He memorized the Zad, as well as the Kafi, Zad al-Mustaqni' by Imam Al-Hajjawi, as well as Al-Kafi, which is 4 volumes. Now, here's something interesting. He didn't need to do that. He did not need to do that. He was fine having just memorized the Dalil and then its commentaries, because the Shamis are very particular to that. He was fine to do that, but he went to the next level and said, no, I'm going to memorize the Umda, then I'm going to memorize the Zad al-Mustaqni', which is a summary of Al-Muqni'. I'm going to memorize that, right, which is mostly used in the Gulf. So that's used in the Gulf, Egypt, right, big sections of Iraq. It's like, no, I'm going to memorize that instead. I'm going to put this along. And then he did the Kafi. And then he built his fatwa and his rulings upon the Kafi. I'm almost complete with him, and we can go to Salah, inshallah. Now, after perfecting this area, he was made to review his knowledge, to study and review over the Arabic syntax, grammar, and other affairs. Then, in Damascus, after this review, 10 scholars gave him permission to speak and teach, and conferred upon him the rank of Marja. So some 10 Maraji conferred upon him the rank of Marja. Then he heads back to Duma to teach. Now, the confirmation of his status of Marja was made in the year 1324. He became part of a body of Maraji in the year 1329. Now, then at this point, during 1329, there was a revolution going on in Syria, because the French had been there, then the Baathists were coming in there. There was also Aramean nationalism that was creeping, anti-Arab sentiment, which is slowly on the creep in Iraq and in Syria. There's a lot of anti-Arab prejudice that's starting to go on, even though they're speaking our language. So you're starting to see this, and he was surprised by these changes because nationalist sentiment was now being made to take the place of religious sentiment. So he began the process of fighting in this war. And he wound up fighting in wars against the French, as well as in what would later become Baathists. He lived into old age, and he died on Friday, the 24th of Sha'ban, 1385, just before Asr. And when it was found that he had died, they came out in droves to his funeral because of his respect and what he'd done. He has a number of texts that he's done, rulings that he's broken down, and principles that he's explained in greater detail. Magnificent scholar, one of the recent Maraji of Duma, right? And you can see that he has certain Dumi traits. If you look at the way his amama is, that's more of a Dumi amama, but the black turbush, the white jalabiyah with the black jalabiyah on top. It's like this, you can see this is the sign of the Hanbali cleric, right? So you can see it's like there's certain Dumi things, but he's making you understand, no, I'm still upon this madhab, right? I may have my imam wrapped in the Dumi fashion, black turbush, black jalabiyah over the white jalabiyah. That's like the Hanbali cleric, right? That's the sign of them where everyone knows who that is. You can see the same thing here, right? White jalabiyah, black, right? So inshallah, when we return, we'll be talking about Imam Bahr al-Ulum, the ocean of the sciences. Imam Abdul Qadir al-Hattawi, when we return, inshallah. So I say at this point, أقول قولي هذا استغفر الله لي ولكم أستغفر الله إن الله غفور رحيم رحيم الراحمين. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وبعد. Okay, so before we left for Salah, we mentioned that we're going to make reference to Imam Abdul Qadir al-Hattawi, rahimahullah. He died 1402 Hijri. He's one of the recent Maraji. Now he's interesting because he started off studying the Dalil, memorizing the Sharh, and also memorizing all of its smaller commentaries and Hawashir, which is roughly about 10 books. So he wound up doing this, memorized 2 more riwayat of the Quran in his early years, and one of his finest teachers was Imam Mustafa Ash-Shatti, rahimahullah. So that's one of his sheikhs. He's known as Bahrul Ulum, the ocean of the sciences, because he had such a deep knowledge of so many different levels of the religion. And then he also went outside of that and dealt with things such as merchantry, animal husbandry, and also engineering. So it was just really a class apart from so many others. We then have Imam Mahmud al-Dumi. He lived from 1303 to 1369. Now, Imam Mahmud al-Dumi, something about him is he is born there and starts off with the memorization of the Quran with the riwayah of Hafs and Asim. Then he builds his profile. Now, he studied with the main scholars there before heading to Damascus. And in Damascus, he learned from the main scholars of his day, memorized and worked on the Dalil as a main commentary source, and built upon that using other books, particularly Ghayatul Muntaha. He used the Ghayatul Muntaha as his basis for fatwa, so which would mean he was on the strict side. Also was based in Egypt, as you can tell from the white amama and the red tarbush. This means he is a graduate of Al-Azhar, right? His family of humble origins didn't come from Maraji on every side. His father had learned from the great Marja, Imam Mustafa Ash-Shatti, rahimahullah, and he was also from Duma as well. Imam Ash-Shatti was from Duma. He taught the commentaries on the Dalil, as we said, Manar al-Sabil by Imam Dawayan, Nail al-Ma'arib, and other than this. Now, when he went on Hajj, he had the opportunity to study with many scholars during the time he was on Hajj. Because remember, this is still during the time where Hajj was an arduous journey. You didn't have sort of the 4-star hotels and things. So when you went on Hajj, it was like a big lifetime journey. So he's studying with scholars and different people, and he had the opportunity to be with Imam Muhammad al-Hashimi, Abu al-Maidani, and Muhammad Salih al-Farfur, and a number of others. After he completed his Hajj, he would come back to Duma. He would then be declared Marja at that point. Now, he wrote mainly rulings. He didn't do commentaries, but he did do rulings. And he's one of those that discussed one of the reasons why the children of Israel, because around his time was this discussion on Zionism. And he said one of the reasons why they should not be allowed to take control of Jerusalem and those areas is because Philistine is actually a waqf, which means it's an endowment. So all of Philistine is an endowment. That when the companions came there, they made that area an endowment. So that's for all Muslims in perpetuity. So you can't cut it up and make it into pieces. Just like if you build a masjid, the masjid's an endowment. I can't say, okay, well, this is my apartment now, and it's no longer the masjid. I can't do that. So we can't give up any part of it. We next have Imam Abdul Majid al-Saghir, because there's an elder to him. He lived from 1325 to 1418. And this particular Imam, his full name is Imam Abdul Majid ibn Muhammad ibn Abdul Majid al-Saghir. He was born to a noble family. His family title is Abdul Majid because his family was known. Now, his father was a great man and was ill and passed off whatever difficulties he had to his son in terms of physical illness. He was an orphan. Imam Abdul Majid al-Saghir was an orphan in his early life, but was left in the care of his mother, Fatima bint Yusuf Bubis, as well as his maternal grandfather. Now, he made sure that he had a proper learning and a proper education. So, Imam Abdul Majid was friends with future Maraji and classmates to them, such as Imam Ahmad al-Shami, who we're going to talk about. He also was friends with Imam Muhammad Hashim al-Tilmasani, Muhammad Badruddin al-Hasni, who was the big Hanafi scholar from Sham, Muhammad al-Attar, and others, rahimahumullah. Now, he started out by studying the Dalil and doing hifl of the Dalil, and then built his methodology of rulings upon the Dalil and then the words of At-Taghlibi, as well as the words of As-Sawalihi. As-Sawalihi is a commentary by Imam Ahmed al-Mardawi, rahimahullah. So he built his rulings upon that text and became a standout Imam. Now, we have this Imam, a personal favorite, Imam Ahmed ibn Salih al-Shami. He lived from 1322 to 1414. He is the last student of Imam Mustafa Ash-Shatti, rahimahullah, is the last student of his. Now, by nature, he was a merchant before beginning his entrance into lifelong study. As you can see, cultural standard, because it's coming from a Duma, so it's got sort of an off-white amama, but it's got, you can see the white jalabiyah, and over that he's wearing the black clerical garb, right? So you see he's got some cultural things, but he's holding to it pretty standard. Now, he started off studying very vigorously and came to be a specialist in the Dalil, as well as in the Manaris, not the Manaris Sabil, because that wasn't written yet, the Dalil and its supporting commentaries and super commentaries. He's mainly known for his rulings. He didn't write a commentary on the Dalil or the others. He preferred to make fatwa, clarificational rulings on affairs. Right? Then we have Imam Faris as-Sirayawiyil. He lived from 1321 to 1414. Again, red tarbush, sign he's most likely he's graduate of Al-Azhar, but the yellow amama wrapping, white jalabi, which you can't see under there, black jalabi on top, clerical garb. Right? He again, coming from Duma, came from a family of humble origins, mostly merchants that were dealing with trade in palm trees and dates, and he got to start studying the religion. Memorized the Quran from an early age, completed the qira'ah of the Quran. Upon completion of that qira'ah, he delved headlong into fiqh, dealing with the Dalil al-Talib. Then from there, he dealt with Ghayat al-Muntaha by Imam Al-Karmi, who died 1033, which is built on top of Al-Muntaha, right? So he gave a number of landmark rulings, one of which was against land leasing for the purposes of what he gave a ruling against was where people were trying to land lease in a certain way in which the leasing actually wound up coming out as a mortgage. And so he said, listen, this form of land leasing, it looks permitted on the outward, but it's not, because the end result and goal of it is to create a mortgage, and that's haram. Now, we have this big Imam, Imam Mustafa Ash-Shatti Ad-Dumi. He lived from 1273 to 1346. Right? This is the big Marja. He's the author of the divine texts. This is the big Marja. Right? One of the most important Marja figures in recent years. When the Khawarij entered Sham in his lifetime, he spoke the truth at a time it was dangerous, and assassination attempts were made on him. He wrote the divine text, Al-Uqul al-Shar'iyya fi al-Radd ala al-Wahhabiyya, and his book, Ta'yid al-Tasawwuf. And he's got a very, very powerful pull still today. Now, I'll give you something interesting about him. He's from the Shatti family, but he was born in Duma. His grandfather, Imam Hassan Ash-Shatti, along with Imam Mustafa Ar-Ruhaybani, two Maraji. So his grandfather, Imam Hassan Ash-Shatti, came together with another Marja, Mustafa Ar-Ruhaybani, who died 1243, and they did a super commentary on the Ghayat al-Muntaha by Imam al-Karmi. So his grandfather is well known for his knowledge, well known. And he picked up some things from his grandfather through his father. But one of his main sheikhs is Sheikh Abdullah Sufan al-Qadumi, who was studying his hadith book. So he's one of his main sheikhs. And this man traveled widely, knowledgeable, studied. He actually attempted to join between the Zad and the Dalil. He tried to sort of synthesize the Zad and the Dalil and create a shortened set of principles from that. But his main area was theology, because he had to deal with certain things in his time that simply would not go away. He also tried to boil down Taqi ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim's texts into more digestible matters in terms of rooting out mistakes and just leaving what's correct in. Now, this is a great example. This is a rare photo of the grand Marja, Ahmad al-Shami, who's in the middle right here. And on his right is another Marja, Imam Hashim al-Sayyid. Right? So you see, it's like you get these rare pictures where these Maraji that are just sitting here, that are just taking in each other's company. You know, only Allah knows what detailed matters they must have been discussing. Right? This is another sheikh, not Marja, but another sheikh, graduate of Al-Azhar, you can tell. Right? So they're sitting here discussing some affair. This is just a huge part of history. All Dumans. Right? Then we have Imam Muhammad Sa'id Badran. He lived from 1343 to 1434. So we're getting closer to our period now. Closer to our period. Right? Now, he was a major figure, well studied, built his rulings upon the Ghayat al-Muntaha, right? Very, very focused on his knowledge, very detailed, right? Left behind mainly rulings. Then we have another personal favorite, Imam Abdul Qadir ibn Badran ad-Dumi, rahimahullah. Lived from 1265 to 1346. Okay, now he in particular had originally been studying Shafi'i fiqh, but delved into the Hanbali fiqh in his early life because of certain things that had occurred and what he felt were divine interventions that pushed him in that direction. So he's well known for writing just so many different books on different topics. One of them is his Al-Madkhal ila Madhab al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, which is sort of like an introductory text to the history of the madhab, the main Maraji scholars, the main texts, the different types of mujtahids, the usul of the madhab. But it's written in a very brief, systematic, and user-friendly way. He then did a commentary of sorts on Rawdat al-Nadir in Usul al-Fiqh. He did a commentary on that, which I have one of his volumes, right? Did a commentary on it where he simplified Imam Wafiquddin Qudama. He simplified his rulings in Usul al-Fiqh. He also did I would say it was more of a hashia on Imam al-Balbani's Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat. He did sort of a hashia on it where he had some sort of marginalia and footnotes and things going. But very, very well-placed scholar, left a huge footprint in this religion. And a lot of these Maraji', like Imam Muhammad Sa'id Badran, right? These Maraji', Mustafa Ash-Shatti, these Maraji', a lot of times they'd go to like Jeddah or other places where they were required, because right next door to them was Arabiya. And what tends to happen is the Hanabila of Arabiya will follow Egypt, or if the Maraji' from Egypt, if they're looking to learn, Maraji' will either come to them from Sham or they'll go to Egypt. So they tend to go to Sham, go to Arabiya. Now let's talk about some contemporary Maraji'. All right. This is Imam Abdullah Mahmud as-Sayyid. The Sayyid family is quite famous. He lived from 1341 to 1423. Duman scholar, memorized the Quran at an early age, right? See the white amama, red tarbush, proof of Azhar, graduation. Comes back, right? He's leading, teaching the people, Maraji', doing not commentaries but hawashiyah, giving rulings on different landmark topics, right? Then you have another Imam, Imam Hashim Mahmud as-Sayyid, from that famous Sayyid family. He dies 1439. He died in Jeddah because he moved there to teach fiqh in detail. Again, built his rulings on the Dalil as well as Ghayat al-Muntaha. Very detailed. Right? Then we have Imam Nizar as-Sayyid. He died this year, 1439. Well, 1439, not long ago. Like I'd say about 4 months ago. So he died at that time. He was struggling with an illness for a period of time. Right? Then we have Imam Abdul Majid. Right, this is the elder. He died 1418. Right? Another scholar of Duma. Great knowledge. Now we'll talk about contemporary living scholars. This is Imam Abdul Rahman Ash-Shami and his brother, Imam Salih Ash-Shami. They are the sons of this man. So they are the sons of Marja. So we'll start with the younger. Abdul Rahman Ash-Shami, born in Duma, starts his studies. Completes the Quran, builds his knowledge up, starts to work out his mental brilliance through the Dalil, and builds his rulings on Ruhaybani and Shatti's commentary on Al-Karmi's works. So when he answers questions from the standpoint of Ruhaybani and Shatti, who was Sheikh al-Mashaykh, through Karmi, which means he's going to give the stricter ruling. So his position is, he warns people against wiping over anything other than the leather hoof because of the amount of confusion that's resulted because of it. So he actually warns people. He says, don't do it. So he's like really strict. And he tells people it's better not to combine the laws. It's like really strict because he's following the ruling of Ruhaybani. Ruhaybani is known for his azima, his cautiousness. Now this is Imam Salih al-Shami, right? And he's focused mainly on the hadith majlis. So over the past probably 40 years, 50 years, he's been working on taking the hadith books, taking the chains and putting them together and combining them under one cover to make them more accessible to the Muslims at large. And by accessible, I mean the books that don't require a certain amount of knowledge in order to access them. So you're sort of putting them together and making them sensible. An example of this is Al-Jami' Bayn al-Sahihain by the Lil-Imamain al-Bukhari wa Muslim, which is by Imam Salih Ahmed al-Shami, where he took al-Bukhari and Muslim, put them together. So all the ahadith that do not repeat, he's put them under one cover. And the ahadith that repeat, he's put them in the footnotes, so it can be studied like a student's manual. It's very systematic, very useful. It's around 5 volumes. So he's been focused mainly on this, on the study of hadith and sort of doing takhrij of ahadith and breaking down things. He helped to solve the confusion in Arabic that was happening over the printing houses with the different numberings. I don't know what's going on in English, but in Arabic, he helped to solve that confusion. So he sort of got that sorted, that there's one numbering system, there's one set of words. He's Dewey Decimalized the system to where there's one set of principles. And all he pretty much did is he probably pretty much cracked open a Mughni and just used that system of alphanumeric coding and just laid that on everything. So everyone's doing that now. He's doing the similar thing in fiqh. He was based in Duma, and then at the beginning of the civil war and then the Khawarij uprisings, he barricaded himself in his house. But he's still alive as far as I know. Imam Salih al-Shami goes back and forth to the Gulf. Back and forth. But he's had some struggles with his health. He, as far as I know, has had no struggles with his health. Imam Abdul al-Shami's had no struggles as far as I know. Another living, Marja, Imam Muhammad Arbash, or sometimes pronounced Arbash. Alright? Lifelong health issues. Okay, but doesn't stop him from getting around. He's in his middle 90s, 95? He's 95 years old. Looks like his 50s instead. But he's really young, fresh character, right? Rulings, looking at modern issues. And imagine being 95 years old, the wealth of life experience you have, wealth of knowledge that you have. And then we have Imam Ismail ibn Badran. Now, he stands out because he is coming from Duma, family of Maraji, memorizes the Quran, studies the texts, right, and has built his rulings mainly upon the Dalil, and also, in addition to the Dalil, he's built his rulings upon other texts. Now, in his majlises where he has around 40 students, he was affected by the shelling of Duma at one point. He was ill, but he recovered from the illness. Now, he has around 40 students, and he'll be listening to several different texts. So he'll have a student reciting to him the Zad, another one, which will be Kifayat al-Abid, right? Then another one, the commentary on that, and then another one, Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat. These are all books that he studied. These are all Shami texts. He doesn't put a lot behind the Zad. He doesn't really study the Zad or Rold al-Murbi'. He knows about them, and he obviously knows the rulings in them and such, but those aren't his favorites, right? Those aren't his favorites. His main ones that he studies are those texts. And so because of that, the Dumi scholars tend to be a little bit more on the strict side. So I'm putting all this together then. You can see this picture here. Al-Jami' al-Kabir in Duma being rebuilt after extreme damage during the Khawarij uprisings of Daesh. Right, so it suffered some setbacks. Right, Duma suffered a lot of setbacks. But that's not the end of Duma's story. So even after all these difficulties, Duma continues. It's endured so much throughout history and remains standing. Even during this difficult time, you can see that some respite is on the horizon. And we ask that Allah protect and ennoble this hamlet. I wanted to say in closing then, that if you look at the history of Duma, which I basically took you on sort of a 3,000 year history, up until now, it's amazing that all of what's elapsed, how great of a people that Allah has brought out of this area. And it's such a small area. It's such a small area. Now it's northeast of Damascus by around 14 kilometers, right? It's, close to, it's 70,000 plus people. And this Masjid al-Jami al-Kabir, this is the biggest dome in all of Syria. In terms of the dome and the building, because it's a real stand-apart place, that this building goes through being a place where the sun was worshipped, then it goes to being a cathedral, then it's brought in as a masjid. It's amazing how this whole thing happens, because it's gone full circle, where the people they were upon Tawheed, then they fell into Shirk, then they come back to Tawheed. So all of this is significant, right? And so we learn from the people of Duma steadfastness. And all these different scholars we've come to respect. This is just a piece of them. Just the same thing I've said about the Palestinian scholars. I could show the same thing about Kefr Qadum, or the same thing about Safarin, or somewhere like that. It's amazing that these little places produce these type of people. It really is one of Allah's signs that you witness all of this. So I say with this, أقول لكم لهذا استغفر الله لي ولكم أستغفر الله إن الله غفور رحيم حميد رحيم. Now, are there questions over what we've covered? I wanted to say that the reason why, like I said, I did this is because there's a link between Duma and the hadith class we're doing, because Abdullah Sufyan al-Qadumi is the sheikh of Mustafa Ash-Shatti, who's a Duman, and many others. So there's a link between this, and because it's been in the news, I wanted to bring this to our attention, because we really are indebted to Allah for Him giving us such great people that has come from this, and this hamlet has given us all these different people, right? We're really indebted in a major way. So are there any questions? Questions? Yes.
So in a place where there used to be idol worship, or in this case sun worship, and then Christianity was there as well. So in those kind of places that exist around the world, it's okay to build something on top of that, in terms of making it into a masjid or a place.
No, they didn't build on top of it. They converted it straight into that.
Oh, so that
they didn't build it. They converted. This was a place. This was a temple for sun worship. Then it was converted into a church. Then they converted it into Al-Jami al-Kabir. They just flat out converted it straight over. Right. So as long as whatever idols or whatever's in there is destroyed, just convert it straight over. Because this happened in India. When Muslims came over, they didn't have. These are third wave Muslims when they're coming to India. So they don't have time to go through a lot of the process there. So some of those masjids were converted straight across from Hindu temples and just straight into masjids. Right? Because if it's here and it's built and it's sturdy, and we can scrub it clean and get the idols and everything else out of here, destroy the gargoyles or whatever carvings have been put, fine. Convert it straight across. Right? And the evidence that people would use would be, well, when the Prophet ﷺ cleansed the Kaaba, he just destroyed the idols. But he converted the Kaaba straight over. He didn't say, I'm going to destroy the Kaaba and then rebuild. No, straight over. Right? Straight over. Right? Any other questions? Yes.
Imam Uthman Nuri al-Khatib, the one that lived from 1279 to 1385. He studied the Umda, Zad, and Kafi. What was the book that he studied for Usul al-Fiqh?
Usul al-Fiqh is the Mukhtasar al-Rawdah. Mukhtasar al-Rawdah.
Is that the Hashia of?
It's a summary. It's not a Hashia.
Okay.
It's a summary. All right. Any final questions? Yes, brother. Assalamu alaikum.
Sheikh, you know, after all this history that you've just given us, you know, with the Shias basically rule, the Alawis ruling Syria for the last 60 years or so, something to that, 50 or 60 years.
Sure.
Did they not try to even bring in some of their own so-called Shia scholars and move the Orthodox Muslim scholars out? Or they just left them as they are and let them carry on studying and teaching the way they've carried on studying and teaching for centuries?
Okay, so the question is, at the coming of the Ba'ath, did they not try to remove or to bring in their own people to teach them in order to implement Shia rather than have the people of the Sunnah be where they are? Okay, the reason why they didn't do this is because the Alawi, the people that are running Syria in terms of the temporal stuff, like Bashar al-Assad and his father Hafid, they're Alawis. And the Alawis are less theologically sophisticated than, say, the Twelvers of Iran. The Alawis don't have systematic books. They don't have a history of Marjas and scholars down through the ages. They don't really have that. So because they don't have that level of theological sophistication, much of their religion is esoteric. So it's hidden. And there are secret rituals that take place and secret incantations that are made and things like this. So because of that, they don't have a great theological backdrop of history that they can take from. So because of that, they allied themselves with the French, which made it possible for them to later maneuver into position when the French left and to become who they are. And it's safer for them to externally act like Sunnis, while they might have their own religious practices in private, than for them to try to take over, because there are such a small number of people overall. It's not worth it for them to try to go through that process, because among Shia, they're a minority among Shia. So how could they possibly hope to take over regarding Muslims? So they've had to use communism and the military, because Ba'ath is a communist doctrine. That's what ruled Iraq under Saddam, Syria. You know, that's a communist doctrine. That's what they had to use, because using the Alawi method would not have worked. There's not enough tools. There's not enough books. There's not enough history. There's not enough schools. Many people could probably not even name like 3 seminaries where you could study like Alawi theology, because they either don't exist or they're so small in the bigger scheme of things, they're not very significant. Any other questions? Yes?
You know, with the state of Duma right now, are there people who are still going out there to study?
Okay, so the question is, the state of Duma right now, are people still going out there to study? Alhamdulillah. Yes, people can still access Duma. The only issue is it's with great personal danger to yourself. If you've ever remembered the sign that reads, enter at your own risk or proceed at your own risk, you do so at your own risk in a way that you're risking yourself in a capacity in which you would not have been before. Now, the numbers have probably thinned out, but there are still people who will take the chance and go anyway. But you'll find most of those people tend to be within Sham proper rather than external. I'm sure there are probably people external to Sham that are trying, but most of the time I just hear about people internally inside of Sham, like in Palestine, in Jordan, places like that try to make the trek. Sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. And it may not be that they get killed, it may be they get detained or there's shelling happening, so they go back. Right? There's all different types of stuff, but it's clearing up, because now you'll find that with this rebuilding project happening, it's like there's a reflowering of it. So it may be in the near future that things settle down enough to where you can start having interchange like there had been before. Right. Any other questions? No? Okay, so we'll close here. And inshallah, next week we will be returning to the text, inshallah, as we had been. And we will continue from there, but I felt it necessary to mention this because it's come from the news a few times. So we say, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك إنه غفور رحيم الرحمن الرحيم ولا إله إلا الله والسلام عليكم.